Last but not least, you can probably tell through 3 episodes of this podcast that I'm somebody who likes to focus a lot on the X's and O's and the real on tape stuff of watching NBA basketball. So I'm not the type to get into the drama and theatrics off the floor of the NBA very often, right? There's all types of different things that go on off the court, storylines like the Jalen Green situation, if you know, you know. Um, the Malik Beasley situation, if you know, you know, right? There's a couple of different scenarios this offseason where, you know, off the court stuff can be a good gossip topic for a podcast if you're looking for something to fill the time. Um, and I'm usually not really into that kind of stuff because I don't feel like it serves any purpose, and usually it doesn't contribute to whether or not that guy or those guys or that team is effective on the floor, right? The Malik Beasley situation is a little bit different because it truly affected his free agency situation, and he right now is not playing for a team, and he's coming off of one of his best years of his career as a 3 point shooter. So maybe that one matters a little bit more, but typically the off the court stuff, unless it led to an injury or it led to an arrest, which we'll get to in a second, usually it doesn't flow onto the floor enough for you to be worried about um, it really impacting your favorite basketball team. Until now. Until now. And I'm gonna address it. I'm gonna address it briefly. I'm gonna do it in a funny but modest way. Um, the NBA with the NIL stuff going on in college athletics and the rise of sports betting apps like FanDuel and DraftKings and ESPN Bet, they've really leaned into the gambling space in a way that's quite special. First of all, I feel like it's a strong reflection of the problem the league has had for the last decade plus, where guys were getting suspended and losing, significant money, and uh, also kind of taking a hit to their reputation because of things like smoking weed, right? Because it feels a little silly to dismiss a guy from his team or suspend him for a significant time or fine him for smoking weed, but on a night to night basis, you're promoting Budweiser and all these other different kinds of alcoholic beverages on a night to night basis, which you can make the argument alcohol is just as bad as weed. I'm not here to be the moral police on that, but just saying. And gambling can be just as dangerous of a vice as smoking weed or alcoholism, right? So the fact that the NBA and all sports, quite frankly, have gotten into the gambling game, the vice that it is always is going to come with its net negatives. And one of them is that you can't really regulate everybody in terms of who is to participate. So here's what we're going to do, because there's a lot of reporting around this. There's a lot of news around it. And it can all get kind of convoluted, a lot very complicated if you read all these different reports all kind of at one time. It can just feel like a brain dump. It's kind of like if you were walking into a courtroom and kind of just handed, you know, this full layout of what the situation is with no further context behind what the person is, what the person's background is, or anything else. You're just handed, you know, a big packet of information with independent clauses and everything else. Like it just again, it's very complicated. So here's what we're gonna do. Here's what we're gonna do. I have a phone, as we all do. Shout out, shout out to AI. One of my favorite apps, personally, when it comes to collecting information, is Perplexity. So we're gonna ask Perplexity, can you explain in Cliff Notes version what is going on with the NBA gambling situation? Because you just see names and you just see images, right? You see Chauncey Billups, you see Terry Rozier, you hear Mafia, right? You hear that 30 names have been detained. You hear that the Portland Trailblazers, in the meantime of this situation with Chauncey, you hear that Tiago Splitter, had to say it, is going to be the interim head coach for the Portland Trailblazers in the meantime. Like, it's a it's just a lot of stuff going on. So let's read what perplexity's summary of this whole thing is. It says the 2025 NBA gambling situation involves a major FBI investigation and arrest related to an illegal gambling and rigged poker scheme. Prominent NBA figures arrested include Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier, Portland Trailblazers head coach Chauncey Billups, and former player Damon Jones. I think that's also the same guy that J.R. Smith threw the soup on. That's neither here nor there. They are accused of sharing insider information such as player injuries, lineup changes, and tanking plans to place bets with a high likelihood of winning, often through illegal sportsbooks and intermediaries to obscure the money trail. Rozier is specifically under investigation for giving non public details used in betting on 7 NBA games, which could violate league rules that allow lifetime bans for gambling offenses. Billups and Jones are charged with helping organize rigged poker games tied to mafia families involving wire fraud and money laundering. The scheme reportedly involved millions of dollars and linked organized crime with NBA insiders. The arrests have led to the NBA placing Rozier and Billups on indefinite leave, and the scandal exposes ongoing risks connected to legalized sports betting and its impact on legal integrity. Lawmakers are responsible with calls for tighter regulation and safeguards in the sports betting industry. This scandal is the NBA's second major gambling controversy in 2 years, Jonte Porter, and has shaken the league during its new season start amid a historic broadcast deal. Other little nuggets of information that were thrown out there was like the leaking of injury situations regarding LeBron James and Anthony Davis on when Davis was on the Los Angeles Lakers. Um, this is trouble, and the worst part is like they've already kind of, let's say, detained slash collected like 30 plus individuals. And like I don't think it's gonna get any better. I think it's actually gonna get worse before it gets better. The NBA has a gambling problem, and it's built out of the fact that there's so many games, there's so many talents, there's so many guys who also don't get on the floor. By the way, just throwing that out there, just being fair. Somebody like Jonte Porter wasn't surprised by any means to a certain extent that he got caught in this because as a guy who's not gonna make a ton of money in his career due to his talent, being able to bet on games is a way to get yourself some bread while being an insider, and doing so as a guy with a pretty low profile would typically be considered as a dude most people wouldn't be watching, or watching out for. Um, so I don't think it's gonna get any better before it gets worse. I think more names are gonna come up, and I think it's gonna take one real prominent name to really set this whole thing ablaze. Right now, that name at the top of the list is Chauncey Billups, because he's a head coach of a basketball franchise. Um, but I genuinely believe that here's the thing. Um, as sports becomes more of a business, and more of entertainment than it is competitiveness, and it is, a true test of a team's ability to make, a championship run, and it becomes more about like clicks, views, highlight plays, and you know, simply putting on a show, things like gambling are just gonna take over. And the reason for that is because people are no longer invested in whether or not their team is good. Um, I said this kind of in passing earlier when I was talking about the Denver Nuggets, like, Jokic, you messed up my parlay. That's a lot of how people speak nowadays when they talk about sports, right? it's not necessarily, and don't get me wrong, there's people who's loyal to the soil to their team, but people are much more loyal to their favorite player, or they're much more loyal to whoever is going to help them hit their parlay that night, or whichever team is going to help them hit their parlay that night, right? Um, and that means much more, so many more names are going to be involved in this space because loyalty to the team, loyalty to organization is no longer what it used to be. And so the integrity around it is also no longer what it used to be. The mafia is crazy. Um, Being in cahoots with the mafia is crazy. I know, Mafia Old Country came out earlier, this year. Shout out to that game, actually kind of a fire game. Not the point though. But didn't even really know like mafias were still like running around. Not to say they don't exist, but like especially in the United States, I didn't know that like, NBA players and coaches had like access to even get jammed up by the mafia. Maybe that's just my naivety. Maybe that's just me being in the house too much. Don't know. But I don't have a ton of analysis on this per se because at the end of the day, like I don't really know what this is gonna mean for the league moving forward. This is a big year for the NBA as far as getting the NBA back on NBC. Um, this being a big year as far as this is gonna be the last year of Chris Paul. This is another year of seeing whether or not the parity in the league sticks. There's a bunch of different storylines to cling on to, whether it's the LeBron James situation with him and the Los Angeles Lakers, whether or not he's going to be on the team, past this season. Giannis Antetokounmpo with him and the trade rumors that constantly are surrounding him. I think Colin Cowherd said something earlier on his show about the Bucks sending him to Golden State. Like that's a storyline. Like there's plenty of storyline narratives being pushed around the NBA on the floor. Um, Paired with the national TV rights deal that's so big and so important for the growth of this game. And then you just got this kind of like thorn in their side now of NBA meets the mafia. So this is something to monitor because maybe one of your, key role players ends up getting jammed up in this thing too. Um it's going to take a real star player for this thing to really like fall apart, like and really become like a big like it's already an issue. I would say it's already a really big deal, but this whole scene gets busted wide open once they find out that like a star was involved. The likelihood of that is probably pretty low, so these guys will probably all get handled pretty quickly. I think if a star player were in the mix of this would be a much more overblown situation than it already even is. um yeah, I mean the NBA is in a weird spot. The NBA is in a really weird spot. But in my personal opinion, I think that's what comes with steering away from trying to have competitive basketball on a night to night basis and trying to make everything look like entertainment and a circus. Like, yes, it's supposed to be a fun, enjoyable experience for the viewer. That's usually just supposed to be built out of the talent. Being able to bet on the games, it's cool, but it doesn't change the viewer experience for me. Sure, it adds some money to my pocket if I win, but I'm not any more invested, at least me personally, I'm not any more invested in the game due to my parlay being placed than if I were watching the game just for fun because I just enjoy the game of basketball. And there's a lot of people who genuinely just enjoy the big game of basketball more than they do um, trying to see guys drop 30 so they might win a couple extra bucks. But then you have people who only like sports because they can win a couple extra bucks. So it just depends on where you're coming from. But again, I think that this NBA gambling issue is only going to get worse before it gets better. Maybe I'll drop another video here and there as updates come out on TikTok and the YouTube Shorts. But I'm not going to be doing any more podcasting on this. But I did have to address it at least a little bit because some of your favorite teams are going to be missing some role players soon. Maybe they might be as high profile as Terry Rozier, and they might be as low profile as somebody like Jonte Porter. It all kind of depends, but nonetheless, it is kind of leaking onto the floor a little bit, and hopefully the Portland Trailblazers are able to kind of still hang even without Chauncey. They only lost by 4 against the Minnesota Timberwolves the other night. Had a really strong game from Jeremy Grant off the bench. I think they're still going to be a pretty interesting team to keep tabs on throughout the Western Conference this season. I don't. We'll see. But as far as the NBA gambling stuff is concerned, they've got a lot on their hands. And shout out to Adam Silver. He's going to need all the luck he can get because two scandals in 2 years. It's tough. It's tough.